Hello everyone. So here we are. You are thinking about starting your first planted aquarium, but how much time does it actually take? Is it a daily burden? Can you even fit it into your life? Today we're going to break down all the things you need to do and how much time it actually takes roughly to spend on your tank daily, monthly, weekly. But first I need to ask my YouTube guys, how old do you guys think I am to print this out in such huge fonts? Let's dig into this. So, first things first, all I'm about to say is in relation with an Aquascape planted aquarium, not a regular aquarium, not a marine aquarium, not, I don't know, a cup of water on your bedside desk. It's important because a planted tank is different in many ways from all the other aquarium types. And not all aquariums are the same, even if we are talking about planted aquariums. And this is important, this is good for you because you can tailor your setup and your layout towards the time you have available for that tank. The maintenance requirements of an aquarium depend on what type of plants you use. Is it high-tech or low-tech? What kind and how many fish you have? What type of fertilizer you use and how you actually use them. So, yeah. Oh, and very important, the technical background of your whole tank. Let's see what you need to take care of every single day, mostly. You need to feed everything in your aquarium. That means your fish and shrimps and all the livestock. You need to feed your plants as well. The fish, we highly recommend feeding them once a day. It doesn't mean you can't go away for 3, 4, 5 days without feeding your fish. That's perfectly fine a few times a year, but on a regular basis, you need to feed them every day. I think this is actually a nice thing to do. I always did it in the evening. That was my time spending on admiring my tank. As for feeding your plants, that's much better to do in the morning. So that was my routine, besides grabbing my coffee in one hand and grabbing fertilizer in the other and dosing those fertilizers. Now, this is where you can do shortcuts, but we're gonna get into that later in the video. It's important to have a quick visual check on your tank every day, and that's why I connected this with feeding my fish. So that's what I did every evening. Just take a quick look at your drop checker to see your CO2 levels if they are fine. Take a look at your flow rate. You don't need to take anything apart. Just consider if the flow is proper in your tank, or maybe it's time to clean your filter because the flow has dropped. Check for spots of algae, because the sooner you see it, the higher your chances are to get rid of it quite quickly and easily. So yeah, just besides enjoying your tank, this becomes a natural thing to do, to look for inconsistencies or problems while enjoying the layout itself. The last daily task I want to mention is something that most people don't even have to do, and that is refilling your tank. Now, this may be a daily task, a bi-daily task. You might need to do it once a week in between water changes. It highly depends on the environment of the tank and some of the things inside. So evaporation of water is perfectly normal. When weather is warm and your room is hot, evaporation is going to be much higher, especially if you try to cool down your aquarium, for which we usually use cooling fans that actually blow on the surface of the water and they cool down the water by evaporating it. In that case, you might really need to refill once a day. Also, the surface agitation. So in tanks like these where we use lily pipes, surface agitation is very small, but some people use the factory spray bars and they use a quite aggressive agitation, so the movement of the water surface is quite high. In that case, evaporation is higher as well. So this highly depends on your actual situation, but it might be a daily task in some times of the year. Now, all the time this takes, every single day, I'm not going to take into consideration the refilling because that's far off normal, but feeding your fish, fertilizing your tank, checking on your tank. If you don't want to sit down for 20 minutes to enjoy the tank, you just really need to get through all this, then it shouldn't be more than 2 minutes a day. Preferably split in the morning and in the evening, by fertilizing in the morning and feeding in the evening. So yeah, this is not a lot of time, and skipping 1 or 2 days is perfectly fine. And the next is the weekly tasks. So there's really nothing in between. There are not many things that we would do every 3 days or something like that. Weekly, this is, I would say, your biggest commitment if you start an aquarium. Weekly water changes. What we recommend is doing 50% water change once a week. 50% by your eyes, so we don't really measure it out. We don't talk about net water amount and gross water amount and stuff like that. It doesn't make sense. You just drop to half of your tank and refill. That's actually usually more than half of your water, but it doesn't need to be more scientific than this. It doesn't make sense to actually measure anything. Just do the 50 on your eyes. This also becomes natural when you get into the hobby, and it seems like a daunting task when you are just thinking about starting an aquarium. But I think this is one of the most relaxing things about aquascaping once you get into the rhythm of it. About all the maintenance things, that's what's important, getting into a rhythm. Depending on your layout and setup, this might be just that, a water change and nothing else. If you have quick growing plants, it might also be a light trim if you really want to keep the very same look all the time, which I don't think a lot of people do at home. We try to do it here in the gallery. The tanks look quite similar every single week, so we trim more often than normal hobbyists do. Another thing that is a weekly task in the beginning, but then it gets looser, is cleaning your in and outlets, especially if you have glass in and outlets. If you use the factory plastic ones that come with your filter, that are usually green or gray or even black or whatever, it's not that big of a problem. But when you're using glass, it only looks nice if it's clean. So when you set up a new tank, in the first few months, the biofilm buildup in the glass in and outlets and your transparent filter hose is going to be quite quick. So you need to clean it every week. But as the tank gets matured, you're going to find yourself cleaning them every other week. Then you're going to find yourself cleaning them once a month, and then maybe every 3 or every 6 months. But this is only a weekly task in the very beginning of the life cycle of a new tank. Now, another thing you might have to do every week is cleaning your sand. If you have an open area without plants and you have a lot of open sand area, depending on the fish load of your aquarium and how well you have designed the whole layout, like preventing soil rolling forward onto the sand and stuff like that, you might need to clean your sand every week. Cleaning it might be anything from actually taking out the top layer and filling in with fresh one, or I usually use an old like credit card or any kind of plastic card that I just put in the sand, and I just do this movement. I don't know how to put this in English, but you just do this and you flip over the sand onto itself. So all the small debris on top and maybe the slight algae, it gets into the bottom or in between the sand, and then it just goes away on its own. So that's quite quick, and if you do it regularly, that's all you should be doing. If you don't do this weekly or bi-weekly, then algae can build up and it becomes a much bigger task to clean the sand than it would be once a week. Same goes for cleaning your carpeting plants. A lot of debris can build up in between, especially when the carpet gets really dense. And again, this depends highly on the amount of fish you have. We just usually move the suction hose that takes out the water and the water change above the carpet, just half a centimeter, 1 centimeter. So you always want to prevent the suction taking out your plant from the soil. You just move it above. That way the small light debris will be picked up and your carpet is going to be clean. I believe it's a very good routine to do this with every water change, because in the long term you don't need to do deeper cleans. What you can also do is, besides just moving the suction hose, lightly tapping the carpet, and that will actually make the debris float up a bit more aggressively. There's no need to do that every week. If your debris buildup is so high, then there are other problems in the tank as well. Now, this becomes less and less frequent nowadays, but in my days, I sound old as well. In my days, we used to have the normal internal skimmers. Now we use the glass wherever we can that it attaches to your filter. But if you still have like an Eheim skim inside your tank, you probably have to clean the sponge inside once a week to make it functioning regularly or normally. Now, I should give you a time estimate on these weekly things, and this is where it gets a bit rough. Let's talk about the 60p aquarium, for example. If it's an easy maintenance layout like grass type carpeting plants, this was my thing for Iwagumi when I started out. It wasn't about loving Iwagumi, it was about going for a tank that is easy to maintain and quick. Proper filtration that doesn't need too much care. A tank like this, it's really just about doing a water change, dropping the water level, filling it back up. If you have a water pump for this and you don't need to do it by small buckets or whatever, this is something to do in 15-20 minutes. That's it, that's your weekly routine. The other side of this, still talking 60p, you have really quick stem plants, you have lots of fish, your filter is not perfectly sized or not oversized for the tank, but you're just on the limit of what's enough, or maybe below it. What else? You feed a bit more than you should. It's an easy mistake to do if you are just starting out. So a tank like that, a simple weekly water changing routine might quickly change into algae fight and cleaning your tank, which then might take up to 2 hours, 2.5 hours, even for a small 60-liter aquarium. So you can see it's a very wide range. What I think is realistic to expect is somewhere between half an hour and 1 hour. That would be a normal weekly time frame for a 60p. As we go bigger, some things go bigger in time as well, and some things don't. Cleaning your glass in and outlets, it takes the same time. It doesn't matter if it's 60p or 120p. But doing the actual water change, if you're still doing it with a bucket for a 120p, that's gonna take a lot of time and I wouldn't recommend doing that. Also, like even a light trim would take slightly longer. So when I say 60p is normal from 30 minutes to 1 hour, I would say a 120p normal weekly routine is perfectly fine from 45 minutes to 1.5 hours. So you see, it's not that big of a difference. Now, the size of the tank affects the stability of the tank as well. So we're gonna get into that later on in the video, but it's not just about the physical work and the time it takes. And then we have arrived to the monthly tasks. Now, a monthly task is basically a weekly task, but doing it a bit more properly. Does that make sense? You are still doing a water change because you don't like do a weekly routine and then the next day a monthly. You just switch every fourth weekly routine to a monthly one. Most likely, instead of a light trim or no trimming at all, this time once a month you're gonna take your scissors and do a trimming session. If you're at that part and you don't need to clean your glassware weekly, which comes quite quickly, then probably this is the time where you're gonna spend on that as well, cleaning your filter hoses. And this is where we recommend doing a deeper checkup on your aquarium. So once a month, take a look at every small bit of your technical stuff. Look at your bubble counter and the CO2 to check if there is any liquid left in it. Replace the reagent in the drop checker. That's a monthly task to do. Check on your filter. Just visually check if everything is all right with it, and properly check the flow, which I mentioned on the daily thing. But if you don't do it daily, once a month, check before starting the water change. Look at your flow, if it's the same as it was before or it's dropped, because then you might be in for a filter cleaning. This can be the perfect time for reshaping your plants. If you trim your tank every week, then you won't really see a difference or you can't really make a difference on how the plants actually look and behave. But if you don't touch it weekly and you wait a month, you have a much bigger plant mass, and it would be the best time, if you want to, reshape those plants. Now again, a monthly routine doesn't really have to be a lot longer than a weekly one, or a lot different than a weekly one. You just spend a bit more time doing everything more thoroughly. So I would say just add 20% of the time from a weekly to get to a monthly. So it's not a lot more work. Now, there are occasional tasks that are a bit more difficult to precisely time. This is like, for example, your filter cleaning. Now, if you choose your filter perfectly for your tank, then you need to clean your filter somewhere between every 3 months and every 6 months. Now, with new technology, the filter can let you know when it needs to be cleaned. So like the Eheim digital filters, the 5Es and the Classic Vario, they send you an email before they get clogged up. So it lets you know it's time to clean your filter and you don't need to worry about any of this. Before this technology, what I usually recommended is wait for your tank to drop a bit in flow. That might be after 4 months, that might be after 6 months, whatever it is. Wait for the first time it does that, and from there on, -1 month, it's time to clean your filter. Cleaning a filter, I would say, if you do it properly and thoroughly, it adds to your normal weekly routine about 30 to 60 minutes workload. You need to take out the hoses, you need to clean everything, you probably take your filter to your bathroom, you won't do it in front of your tank. Depends, I do. But yeah, it might take up to an hour. It shouldn't take longer than that. Another thing to do from time to time is replacing your CO2 canister. Now, I think the biggest time-consuming part of this is actually getting a new canister. So you need to take out the old one from the tank, take it to your local shop, get it filled and get it back home. The actual replacement takes about 10 minutes. And I think it is a good time to give you a tip, because a lot of people don't really understand how this works. When you have your pressure reducer on the canister, you open the canister and it's going to go to whatever, 60 bars, 80 bars, somewhere in between. That's your normal working pressure in the canister itself. Now, a lot of people, newcomers, would think that as the CO2 starts to drop, as you are using it, it's going to gradually drop the pressure as well. It doesn't. So it's going to stay at the same pressure. It might slightly differ based on the temperature around it, but that's it. It's going to be constant until the time you get quite close to the canister being empty. So as soon as you start a bigger drop in the pressure, that means you have a few days, maybe 1 or 2 weeks. This depends on what size of canister you have on what size of aquarium. But for example, 60p tank, 2 kilogram CO2 canister, that runs for about 6 months. And when you have the pressure drop, you have about 2 weeks maximum until the canister itself is completely empty. So it's time to sort it out and go for a new canister. Another thing you might need to do from time to time, especially as the tank gets older, is refreshing your substrate. Substrate can last, depending on quality, the quantity and the type of plants you use. But I would say the normal time frame you should expect substrate to last is about a year. In some cases it can be 6 months, in other cases it can be up to 2 years. But after about a year, you have to expect it to drop in nutrient levels, and you have to start providing nutrients back into the substrate system. Now for this we use capsules that we put in the substrate itself. 5-minute, maybe 10-minute tasks, depending on the size of your tank, because the bigger it is, the more capsules you need to put down. But yeah, again, nothing to worry about time-wise. Now all the occasional tasks, this will be part of one of your weekly maintenances. So cleaning your filter, you should never do it in the middle of the week. When you know it's time to clean your filter, the next weekly routine, so you are doing your water change itself, that is the time to do your filter cleaning, or that is the time to replace your CO2 canister or whatever. Placing your substrate capsules, again, for that you need to drop half your water level anyway, so it doesn't make sense to do this as a separate tasks. You should always combine these into your normal weekly routine. Let's talk a bit about the time period that differs a lot from what I've just said, and that is the critical phase, the start of your aquarium, the first 1 to 3 months. Biggest difference is water changes. What we recommend for starting a new tank is 50% water change every day on the first week, 50% water change every other day on the second week, 50% water change twice on the third week, and we start the weekly from week 4. This doesn't have to be followed word by word, but the closer you are to this, the easier time you're gonna have in the first 2 or 3 months of your tank. Algae is coming and going in the first 3 months. Perfectly normal. The amount of algae you're gonna get and how easy it goes away on its own without you doing anything depends on how well you've done on the first 2 or 3 weeks. The reason for this is by doing these frequent water changes, we are helping our filter. When you start a new layout, there is a lot of things going on, and the result of all those things is ammonia. With a cycled filter, you have bacteria that turns your ammonia into nitrate, and you have bacteria that turns your nitrate into nitrate, which is already a fertilizer for your plants. When you start a new tank with a new filter, you don't have these bacteria. So what we are doing with the daily water changes is physically taking out the ammonia from the tank, thus helping our filter. Now, if you do this properly, you're gonna have less algae problems in the first few months. If you start with the weekly water changes, you're gonna have more problems. A lot of people combine this or connect this water changing routine in the beginning to active soils. What I usually say is it's very critical to do this if you have active soil, but it's also very beneficial to do the same if you don't. If you have inert soil, you have gravel or whatever, still, if you are doing the frequent water changes in the beginning, life is going to be simpler down the line. It's also worth checking on your plants more frequently in the beginning. I have a trick that I've showed you in many videos, especially for carpeting plants. You plant one piece of plant right up to the glass on the side. That way you can check on it every single day to see root development. So even if your leaves are starting to melt, which can be normal for a few plants, if you see the root system of the plant from the side of your tank, you can make sure that the plant is actually fine and it's developing new roots and developing new shoots to the sides. It's just the leaves that are visible that started to melt. Or you don't have any development and there is an actual problem with your plant. It's also worth checking for the smallest signs of algae a bit more thoroughly when the tank is fresh. Chances are higher for algae in the beginning, and it can cause bigger problems in the beginning because your plants are not that developed, so algae can outgrow your plants easier than they can in an established aquarium. All this is going to work towards the stability of your system and your tank. I think it's worth doing all this in the beginning. I think you shouldn't feel bad about doing any of this. You have a new aquarium. You want to spend time with it. You want to spend looking at it, seeing it develop. So it should come natural. I know before you have this, before you experience this for the first time, it might sound like a lot of work, but it just, again, it becomes normal. Now, how can all this depend on the actual setup you do? In the beginning, I've mentioned that you can tailor your aquarium to the time you have for it. Biggest difference, high-tech or low-tech. A high-tech aquarium is gonna run quicker. Growth is gonna be quicker. Even if you don't have high-tech plants. For example, you have plants that wouldn't necessarily need CO2 injection. If you provide them with CO2 injection, their growth is going to be quicker. So everything is going to be quicker in the tank. You're going to have to trim it more frequently, for example. So that's going to add to your time. If you run with the low-tech setup, everything is going to be a bit slower. So you might save some time on that. Plant types themselves, fast growth or slow growth. Fast growth, you might need to trim every week. Really slow growth, you might need to trim them every 6 months. For example, if you have a tank with like microzoarium and Anubia species only, which a lot of people do, in general epiphyte plants only, you don't need to spend a lot of time trimming them. It's really just every 6 months. Now, what is high-tech and what is low-tech? It's getting more and more confusing. In the old iteration, we said that a tank with CO2 is high-tech, a tank without CO2 is low-tech. It's not that simple anymore because you have a bunch of very easy to get to CO2 solutions, but it still might be on the low-tech side on your lights. So I would say two biggest things is proper CO2 injection and powerful lighting. That's what makes a tank high-tech. And if you go with lower light and no CO2 or very simple CO2 solution, that would be considered low-tech in my eyes. Now, if you are just getting more and more confused about all this, we have separate videos about different types of lights. We have separate videos about different types of CO2 injection. So get into all that in detail because those are separate videos and really long topics. Now, the fish load is part of this as well. The more fish you have, the more debris you're going to have in your aquarium. So when I said you have to clean your sand or you might need to clean your carpeting plants, depends on the fish load. The more fish you have, the more of this type of cleaning you're going to have to do. Tank size itself. Now, this is where it gets a bit tricky. I've talked about the time difference from the physical standpoint of removing a bigger amount of water takes more time than a smaller amount of water. That makes sense. But in a big scape of aquarium size, what you need to think about is the stability of the aquarium. Now, a small tank, a 30-liter nano tank, it's very quick to do a water change on, but it's going to be much less stable than a 120p. So while the actual routine of a water change is going to be quicker, the requirements for bigger tasks, deeper cleans, filter cleaning and so on, the requirement is going to be much higher on the small tank than it is on the big tank because of the stability of a big aquarium. Now, we can give you a few examples from here, our gallery. Actually, we asked Pami, who's doing our maintenance here in the showroom, and she gave us time frame for some of the tanks. There are a few things to consider here. First, this is done by a professional who's doing this 8 hours a day for years now. So obviously, she's quicker than you will be. But on the other side, to balance this out, we try to keep these tanks very similar all the time. I think the best example is my 120p Iwagumi layout, which Pami said it's 2 hours every week to maintain. If that tank would be in my home, that would be 40 minutes every day. I would just do a water change and that's it. But she's trimming the plants every week, even though they are very slow plants. That tank has a very distinguished look with the plants. We actually have a separate video about that aquarium when I trimmed it, because I wanted to actually change how the tank looks. And that was what, 1.5 hours, something like that. But that was a big trim, and the trim only. Now, going from small to big, we have the Mini M Nano tank, that's 20 liters. That takes about 40 minutes for Pammy to do. Now, 40 minutes for a 20 liter tank, that sounds quite a lot compared to what I just said in the past half an hour or so. That tank needs to be trimmed every week to keep a certain look. So this is where it comes in, what kind of plants you choose and what kind of layout you build. Our next would be the Eheim Clearscape, which is about 70 liters. That takes about an hour to maintain. So that's a perfectly average, I would say. We have the 90 walk around aquarium. That's actually 240 liters, just like a 120p. And that takes about 1.5 hours to maintain. Now, it's a bit more tricky because of the shape. It's a bit more tricky because of the in and outlets are drilled from the bottom. So you need to do a few extra steps that you wouldn't need to do with a normal tank. But yeah, that's 1.5 hours. Then comes my 120p with the 2 hours we discussed. So then comes Homasan's work behind me, which promises about 2.5 hours. Now that is a big tank with a weekly requirement for trimming because, well, a lot of things in there grow really, really quick. And then the big one, and I think the biggest, where you can see the biggest difference on how tank size doesn't necessarily mean a lot more work. The big one behind me, that's 650 liters. That's a lot compared to anything else, and that needs 3 hours of work every week. So if you would just add up average 2 hours for 240, then you would have 5-6 hours for the 650, but it's just 3 hours. So you need to consider all this, all the different aspects. You can't just put a mathematical equation on all this and determine how much time you're going to spend. Now there are a few things that you might want to do or you might need to do. For example, preparing your water. If you want to use soft water, you need to produce RO water, and that takes time. Depending on the system you have, a small one, it's 50 gallons per day, so that's 190 liters in 24 hours. That's not a lot if you have a big tank, but you can go up to, I don't know, 3,000, 4,000 liters per day. So there are really quick systems. Most people are using RO water in a way that they pre-produce the water into a bucket, so it's ready by the time they want to do the water change. But other people have really quick systems where you can just put in the end of the hose into your tank and fill it straight from the RO water. You might have to do an algae deep clean from time to time. Something might go wrong. Weather gets really hot really quickly or really cold really quickly. That's almost as big of a problem. Your CO2 runs out and you don't notice in time. So things can lead you into having algae problems. A lot of people, when they first see a big algae problem, they ask us, okay, how is this going to go away? Most likely it won't. You need to find the source of the problem. You need to figure out what's causing your algae. But getting rid of that source or that problem won't make the algae itself go away. It will prevent it from growing back. But best practice is to physically remove that algae yourself. So that might take a long time. You might spend hours on cleaning algae, but this is something that you can't really calculate up front. This just might happen from time to time, and it is actually, like you're having bad luck if this is happening to you. It's not like something that happens once in every tank's lifetime or anything like that. And something that you might want to do that you don't actually need to do, but a lot of people do, is testing your water. I have a whole video about what to test and how to test, and the conclusion of that video is don't test if you don't need to. But obviously not everyone agrees with this. If you want to test your water and you want to set up all your nutrient levels to be perfect, please do it. It's gonna take a lot of time. Now, how can you make things better or, well, quicker for yourself? Biggest thing nowadays is automation. You can automate your fertilizing, you can automate your fish feeding, you can automate even your water changes with proper technical equipment. It takes money, takes practice in a way that I wouldn't recommend automating a lot of things for very, very new people in the hobby, because you should learn how to notice problems in your tank. And if you put everything on automation, then you won't look at your tank that much and you won't notice problems, if that makes sense. That's the knowledge I can give you. Is I'm very much into making pizza. Every single person who's doing good pizza, they say that you should learn to knead with your hand before you use a mixer. Plants that don't require trimming or are very slow. We covered this, but this is a thing that you can make your life easier with. Adjusting your fertilization. Now, most fertilizers are designed for what I said, the 50% water change once a week. And that is not just about fertilization, but that is also very good for your livestock as well. That is what we highly recommend. But if you know that you don't have time for that, you can switch things around. You can say you're gonna dose 50% of the recommended fertilizer dosage and do 50% water change every other week. The amount of fertilizer should be about the same. It's not that simple, but this is something you can play around with. Biggest time saving you can have is going way overboard with your filtration. Back when I had my last aquarium at home, that was about 200 liters. And I had an Eheim 1200 XL filter that's properly oversized for 200 liters. But I never really had any algae issues, and I didn't clean my filter between rebuilding my tank. So I usually rebuilt it about every year to every 1.5 years. In that time frame, I never opened my filter because it couldn't get that dirty because it was so big compared to the aquarium. And in general, besides this, a good technical background. So properly chosen equipment and reliable equipment. I don't want to say if you go cheap, but if you don't use reliable equipment, you're gonna face other problems. If your filter stops, that's a big problem. If your light stops, if you can sort it out within a few days, not that big of a deal, but it can cause issues. But if it starts to act up, you set your light to 60% and then it suddenly on its own turns to 100% and you don't realize, that's gonna lead to huge algae problems. Reliable products on the technical side of the aquarium, it's very important to make things life easier. So for the times, every day, 5 to 10 minutes, once a week, anything from 30 minutes to about 2 hours, depending on the size of the tank and your experience. Every month, a bit more on that weekly routine. And then all the stuff that comes from time to time, every 3 months, every 6 months, whenever it happens, you just need to spend a few more minutes on stuff, or maybe another additional hour if it's cleaning your filter. That's it. That's what you need to make time for if you want to get into this hobby. What you need to prepare yourself for is the first few weeks. That's going to be a lot of work. You need to find your rhythm and you need to make your own weekly routine and set everything up to that, and converting all this work into enjoyment. So the moment you find that doing a water change is not work, it's spending time with your aquarium, it becomes much better. That's where this whole thing becomes a hobby, and that's where the enjoyment comes from. If you are not willing to put in all the work needed for this, then you're not going to be satisfied with your aquarium. All the money spent on it, all the time spent on it, you're gonna feel it like a waste. If you put in the work and you do everything properly, then you're gonna enjoy what you've done, hopefully for a long time. So yeah, that's it for today. If I forgot about anything, please let me know in the comments below, because I'm sure I did. And yeah, see you next time. Goodbye.